Hi there, it's Ian here, and you're watching Grumpy Opinions, the show where I'm going to tell you all about what I think of films, TV shows, games, and life in general.
Outlander is the Starz TV series based on the books by Diana Gabaldon, all about a bunch of time travellers living in the 18th century in America. Episode 11, Journey Cake, starts out about a year and change down the line from the last episode, and now the cool gang are on the way back from the shops and they come across a burnt out shack where a bunch of Dutch folk used to live. Only they're all there and they've been killed with arrows or they're burnt to death. But they actually do find the wee daughter still alive, although she's horribly burned, and Roger has to do a sad wee mercy kill on her, and then Jamie says some words of comfort while he does it. And back at the Ridge, everyone's kind of enjoying the day, and little wee Jamie is playing with the magic opal from last season, and he says he finds it hot to the touch, and then it magically breaks, and there's a massive big noise, and all the tiny folk can hear like a buzzing drone, and they feel the heat off the stone. But Jamie and Ian can't, because they can't time travel. And that means that Jamie
can travel.
And just then when things are getting exciting, the Browns ride up in force and they tell Jamie they're putting together some kind of unofficial civil protection gang, and they're going to deal with like the Bernie house murderers, and was he going to come along and join them? But he's like, need to think about it, so we'll get back to you later. And then Dr. Claire has to look at Blondie Brown's gammy leg, and then later on at his wife's broken arm, during which time he ends up seeing her Dr. Roland's back. And once they leave, it gives everyone time to think, and wee Ian comes marching up with wanting the truth, and they end up telling him all about the time travel malarkey. And, you know, it's not the best thing, because he gets into his head that he could maybe go back and change things, and when they point out that he won't be able to time travel if he's not born with it, he's not quite pleased. But Bree and Roger, on the other hand, they're kind of like jazzed about heading home to the modern day, even if it does mean saying goodbye to everybody at Fraser's Ridge, and that leads in a whole load of goodbyes and such like. And since it's an episode for goodbyes, Lord John decides to pop up and he gives Jamie a wee picture of Willie, who's finally got himself a decent haircut this season just like Dad. And he handily agrees to take Ulysses away to London because obviously he's hiding out after doing that bad murder on Forbes. And since it's all about coming clean and buy time, Jamie decides to tell Bree all about her half-brother Willie. And then Bree decides not to tell Lizzie the truth and tells her a pack of lies, and then does exactly the same thing to Parsley and Fungus. And then Ian agrees to come with them to the Stones and to look after Roger's land in perpetuity. And then they all eat peanut butter and jam sannies. No, really. No, because apparently this is a big thing for Americans, and it's some kind of plot point for the series, despite literally all but one of the characters not actually being born there. Hey ho. And Claire and Jamie get sad in the cabin, and Roger, Jimmy and Bree go through the Stones, and then they arrive, and Jamie runs off because he sees something. And back at the Ridge, the still ends up blowing up, so all the menfolk run down to help, and they leave Claire behind to resocket some guy's arm. And then Bads come rushing in, and they do a murder on the guy and knock out Parsley and kidnap Claire. And the guys get back, they suddenly realise what's happened. So Jamie runs up to the top of the ridge, and he lights up the fiery cross. Roll credits. So what did I think? Well, I think that this week was very much what you would call a penultimate episode. And watchers of my channel who watch the other video reviews I do might find that I'm repeating some of the same things I said about the most recent episode of Westworld, because that was also the penultimate, i.e. the second last episode of the season. And there's similar factors in both, because penultimate episodes of TV shows often have quite similar problems. But before any of that, let's talk about the stuff that really worked this week. Because the majority of the episode, every scene actually managed to deliver, in both an interesting way and sometimes in an emotional way as well. And we got a lot of nice little payoffs, we got some things that had been mentioned before and some new ideas. And we got a whole bunch of really nice moments for basically Jamie and his bloodline, and a nice, simpler, smaller sort of mum and daughter goodbye moment. And we also got bits of Roger and Ian bonding like they did as a follow-up to the other week. And an interesting decision having a long scene of Bree and Lord John, but then not actually having a scene of Jamie and Roger, which kind of actually makes sense, because if you think about it, Bree and John actually do have a history of sorts, so having a scene with them is kind of nice. And Jamie and Roger are way past all the sort of, you better take care of my daughter kind of point. They're basically, they respect each other by now, and they've kind of reached the point of getting on. So they don't actually need that moment. Roger knows he has to look after Bree. And every scene kind of had a nice moment. I mean, a few bits were a little bit twee. I mean, yeah, seriously. And there were some genuinely funny bits, like Jamie falling asleep just after Claire gets herself all perfumed and nice and ready for some sex. And Jamie's comment about the peanut butter and jelly sandwich.
Are you sure it's to be eaten? You could seal letters and mint your boots with it as well.
Which actually kind of saved that entire scene for me, but I'll get onto that later. And I also loved that they got some really good performances out of some very young children. Now, everybody knows, like, they say don't work with children and animals because kids are difficult to work with. And babies are one thing because, they just cry randomly. And we know this is a show that had problems with baby actors before causing issues. There's the whole infamous, why didn't Jamie hold the baby in the end of season 3? And it turned out it was because the baby kept crying every time Sam picked it up. But in this episode, we get this fantastic bit where we've got wee Jamie absolutely acting his wee socks off here.
That's the cutest fucking thing I've ever seen in my entire life.
And we've got wee German doing his bit as well. And, even the kind of the Bernie lassie at the beginning, not that she had to do a huge amount of acting, but as we said before, earlier in the season, sometimes lying down not doing much involves an awful lot of good acting. And it can't be easy to act convincingly, like, as if you're in unimaginable dying pain under an inch of latex and kind of Burns makeup. And I really like some of the sound design stuff in this episode. We've heard, like, the sound the magical stones make before, that kind of roaring buzz that sounds like bees. Now, maybe I hadn't noticed it as much, but it was much louder this episode than in previous episodes. It also could be because there's 3 time travellers there. That could be because it's something to do with Jemmy, because when he touched the stones, he made it crack. It could be he's got some kind of super time travel power or something like that. Maybe that'll come up later on. But it was just that brilliant moment when they go up to the stones and touch them and boom, suddenly it's gone. There's no sound because they're no longer there. I thought that was really interesting. And I actually liked the fact that the whole thing ended on a big cliffhanger. And at this point, we've got 3 of our main characters now gone somewhere else in time. We don't know where. We don't know where they've arrived. Maybe they did arrive back in the modern day. Maybe they arrived 5 minutes earlier. Maybe something weird's happened, because it looks like exactly the same place. Obviously it's the same place, it's the same location, but it didn't look like it was different. But then also we've got Claire, and she's been kidnapped by the Browns and all that bad guys. Now, obviously, that's going to involve them having to chase down and find them. And there was stuff of that in the next week on, which, as I would expect, for what's probably going to end up being a longer episode than normal, as tends to be the end of a season. But they showed so little of it that makes me think there's an awful lot more to this than we actually know. And I'm really curious to see what that could be. But, being fair, ending on a big cliffhanger is pretty much the most classic penultimate episoditis that you could ever have. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with ending on a cliffhanger, far from it. Ending on a cliffhanger is usually a really good way of making the last episode something people are desperately keen to see. But, exactly like I said in my Westworld episode review last week, for their penultimate episode of the season, and it's all basically exposition and faffing about, dragged out and bookended by some fight scenes. And as I said, that's the problem with penultimate episodes in general, because they tend to be full of faffing about and exposition dumping, and this was a total, test case example of that. And it's really exactly the same kind of thing for Outlander. You basically write the plot in terms of actual advancing story on the back of a hanky on an episode like this. And think about it. Okay, not being funny, what is the actual plot of this episode? And I don't mean what was everything that happened, what was all the scenes and dialogue. What is the actual ongoing plot that you actually had in this episode? Jamie can hear the stones. Bree and Roger decide to leave. They say goodbye to everyone, and they leave. And the Browns visit a couple of times and kidnap Claire. That is actually all that actually happened in this episode that is of note. Because I'm sorry, Lord John turning up and then going, yeah, here's a little picture of your son-in-law. That's not plot. That's a thing that happened, but it doesn't actually change anything really. Unless, that picture ends up becoming a massively important plot line somewhere down the line. But even then, that's the kind of offhand thing. That's like laying it, hiding an Easter egg or something for later on in the line. It's a little Chekhov's gun type thing. And literally, practically everything that happened this week, no matter how you square it, even no matter how much the lines or the moments might be exactly the same as stuff from the book. And, because this is important this week, because this episode was specifically written by Diana Gabaldon herself. Now, her who wrote the books has actually written the screenplay this week. Now, frankly, if I hadn't actually known that, I probably wouldn't have realised. Although that's kind of maybe a blessing, because as you know, I'm not a book reader, because one of the reasons I stopped reading the books, because I read the first one and started reading the second one, I stopped reading it was because I didn't really like her prose style. Now, that's just a personal thing, I wasn't enjoying actually reading the book. I'm not even kidding. There was a few moments in this where I thought the writing was really, really twee, and almost borderline on being a parody of itself. Being a parody of the kind of stuff that happens in Outlander. Aside from the whole really, really clunky does he beat you up scene, which felt like the most totally rote scene. This is like every episode of every cop show where somebody turns around and then goes, oh, get the husband to go out the room so we can find out. does your husband ever beat you? You know, it's all that kind of stuff that you get in like all these cop movie things. And I mean, it also felt like not even a doubling down, but like a quadrupling down on kicking the cat for Brown. Because if we didn't have enough reasons to like already distrust and hate this guy from what he's done so far this season, and the fact that he kidnaps Claire at the end of the episode, do we really need to also just go, oh yeah, and by the way, he also beats up his wife because, you know, he can't be bad enough. Let's have him say some bad things. He'll probably say something racist next week as well, just to make the horror absolutely complete. And on a slightly lighter note, the peanut butter and jelly scene, right, okay, I don't give a good godwally donk who you are, but Claire is a lassie who grew up with a cut English accent, and she lived most of her adult life in the UK, and she grew up with her Uncle Lam, who was also sort of an English gent type, gallivanting down doing archaeology, of which generally there isn't an awful lot of archaeology in that classic terms of it to do in America, because she was like going around to the pyramids and stuff. Now, there's nothing that old in America. So no, I don't believe that Claire would be going around using the term jelly, because British people don't say jelly, we say jam.
Hartley's new jam.
See if you can tell it from homemade.
And yeah, especially because even at that time in the colonies, it wasn't even called jam, they called it preserve or marmalade. Now, the term jam didn't even become popular until the late 18th century, so it would be a brand new term, and it wasn't called jelly until much later. I mean, that's like basically 20th century. Okay, it could be she's calling it that because Brie grew up in Boston, so Brie probably grew up calling it jelly instead of jam. But no, I'm sorry, you're not getting that one. It's a silly word, and you're using it wrong. I'm sorry, you are. Also, vitamin, not vitamin, and aluminium, not aluminum. But no, seriously, my actual problems this week really kind of stemmed from this being a bit of a treading water episode. I mean, it's like they ran a multiple checklist of all the things that are really outlandery that they could fit into one episode. And it literally is like a tick-off list. It's like, scene where Jamie is sad, scene where Claire does doctor things, scene where Claire does a science thing and talks about it, scene where Lord John looks at Jamie and fancies him, scene where Lord John talks to Jamie about Willie, scene where Lord John and Jamie sit and reminisce about something, scene where Bree and Jamie talk about Willie, scene where Bree and Roger are talking about going back to the future, people actually talking about the mechanics of time travel and awkwardly trying to make sense of it. And that's, again, this is one that the show does not know what it's doing, and it felt like a total cop-out that they then turned around and went, oh no, we could change some things. They've no proof of that. They've decided that out of nowhere. There was never any proof that they actually managed to save anybody. They just decided that they probably had because they said, but Claire had no way of going back and verifying if that was the case, and if they did, then it's never ended up in the TV show. And yeah, and there was a bunch of other stuff true. There was a mercy killing, there was a fight, there was a bonk, there was a kidnap. And honestly, literally, the only thing I think that was missing from Outlander's standard sort of modus operandi was that nobody got raped this week. I mean, if that had happened, I think we would have scored a complete Outlander bingo. A few of you are probably like tearing your hair out and screaming, but Ian, this is what Outlander's about, this is what the show's about. And I'm like, yeah, I know. But it's usually done in a slightly more subtle way. It's not usually crammed into one single hour of TV and made to feel like it's all filler. And that's the problem, because this week's episode was basically filler. And I'm not saying the moments are bad. Like I said, a lot of them were really worked. A lot of them were really emotive. But they were all strewn together in a way that didn't make any sense. It would have made more sense if these individual moments had happened over the last 2 or 3 episodes, bits and bobs, rather than cramming it all into one episode. I mean, this reminded me of, now this is a Star Trek thing, but it reminded me of the last ever episode of Star Trek Deep Space Nine, where they've already, killed off the bad guys, done everything, saved the universe, and the last episode is basically everyone walking around going, hey, I just got a new job here on this ship, hey, I'm off to live on this space colony, and hey, I'm off to that planet there, and it just feels completely pointless. And cramming like 3 appearances from the Browns into this one episode, I mean, couldn't they have just moved the first one back to like the episode where Roger was getting like his bad neck and all that 2 weeks ago? I mean, you could have had them literally turn up and talk about that then, and it would have been more plausible, because you would need to have suddenly done a year-long time skip. And it feels like it's just poorly thought out to have that stuff and rush it and pad it out so much, because this is a week that there wasn't really an A and B plot. There was just an awful lot of scenes all jammed together and people sitting around the ridge, talking, and then at the end there was a kidnap. I mean, this was like a total middle of the week episode of a soap. That's what it felt like. But also now at the end we had them actually lighting the beacon, and Gondor calls for aid and all that. But we never actually did get a whole addressing of the whole issue that isn't it a bit racist to have people burning crosses. And I know a lot of people online, I mean, it didn't bother me, but a lot of people online were really upset about that at the beginning of the season. And I was sure somebody said at some point that that was going to get addressed in the story. I mean, maybe that was, I guess, addressed in the book, but it's not going to get addressed now in the show. Because, I mean, what, is Jamie going to have a random chat about it? With who? With Claire? What, as soon as he rescues her from somebody, is she going to turn around and go, how did you manage it? And he'll go, oh, I burnt the fiery cross. And she's like, that is a bit racist, Okay, maybe that scene was cut out or something, and maybe, it's something else. And now that Roger and Bree and they've just gone, I mean, as I said, I don't see anybody suddenly having a conversation about it. Also, speaking of the kidnapping, I really hope that there's actually a proper reason for this kidnapping, and it's not just because, Blondie Brown didn't manage to get his end away with his wife and blamed, Dr. Rawlings, and then realised that she's Dr. Rawlings and he wants vengeance for not getting his end away. I mean, honestly, if that's the case, that's pretty tragic. And now, yeah, I don't really know what anyone else thought about this week, and, I can only go with my feelings on it, and there it is. I didn't have a bad time with it, and I could have had a slightly better time. These are the problems I feel with this episode. And I am actually totally looking forward to next week. And as I said, I didn't have a bad time with this. But there's genuinely, at this point, no real clear story going forward. And I said this was a problem last week when they killed off Bonnet and they suddenly ended all the plot lines. Now, I'm sure other people know what's coming up, because I'm pretty sure most of this is probably not from this book. This is probably either the very end of this book and stuff from the next book, book 6, or it's entirely from book 6. And I don't want people to specifically tell me actual events and things that happen in it. I mean, if that is the case, that's fine. Just let me know, this is book 6 stuff, or this is book 5 stuff. That's cool, I'd like to know. But no spoilers, please. And please don't tell me what's going to happen next week if it's something that is straight out of the books. But yeah, till next time, I've been Ian, and these have been my grumpy opinions. And a big shout out to my top tier patrons, Judith Coloma and Michelle Forbes. Thanks so much. Honestly, you guys have made this lockdown really fantastic. Really, honestly, it warms my heart a massive amount. And thank you to everybody else, who is a Patreon or just who watches the channel. Everybody take care. Everyone stay well. The days are getting longer and the weather's getting warmer. You all have a good one. Bye.